noticed all along the way all these rooms with wedding parties. Now, the wedding had happened earlier in the sunlight, which for the Jewish person is the third day of the week. 6 o'clock comes. It's now the fourth day, but to us it's still Tuesday. So here's the point. We see all these wedding. We walk up to this store. So I'm talking to the shopkeeper and I said, "What's with all the weddings today?" Now he knows I'm a Christian. He knows I'm a student. And he says, "What day of the week was the wedding that Jesus went to in Cana?" And I just sat there like totally dumbfounded. So he says, "Look it up." So I open it up. And what does it say? Now, on the third day, there was a wedding. So this is just the two events. This is all overview. This we'll go over and over and over as we walk through the text. I did put on your handout. This was something that we did. I think it's the third lesson in John, second or third. And this is what the author. Well, here, let me show you his name, William Countryman. So this is a good book. He's got some great insight to the Gospel of John, and he calls it the mystical way. And he's the one who's emphasizing the idea of we're looking at a path of the disciples. How do you get from not abiding in God to fully abiding in God? And it's not that you're not saved along the way, but it's the more of the idea of the transformation that happens, spiritual maturity. And the idea is that somewhere along the line, mystical union with God is really the goal for humanity. So when you look at the Gospel of John, as I mentioned, we're right here at the top. We're still at the very first chapters where the disciples are seeing something about Jesus that they're not really sure what it is, but it's there. So that's chapter 1 and 2. Then you have all of these events that start to bring you closer to God. So that as you gain trust in Jesus, you end up down here with abiding. This is where abiding happens. And we notice in John, it's chapter 17, right? He doesn't call us to abide in chapter 1. He calls us to follow the path, to start getting on the path and be faithful on the path. And that will lead to union with God. Because union with God this is a long-term event. You know, if you're a brand new Christian, the initial enlightenment is all you need to follow. Just start moving and God will work to transform you. So just a reminder that that's where the goal is, at least according to John. Okay, now this is going to be something that has nothing to, well, it doesn't seem to have much to do with the Bible, but it does. Oh, by the way, here, I forgot I put this in this morning. Okay, so you have this mystical path, right? And the mystical path is bringing you to union with God. That's the whole point. And what image does the Bible use for the union with God?
Bridal.
A wedding, a bride. The bridegroom is going to get his bride. We're the bride of Christ. Now, would that be coincidence that we're at a wedding in Cana where the bridegroom is coming to get his bride? So yeah, and it's the intimacy of when Jesus says, "Repent, for the kingdom of God is near." That word near is the intimacy between a husband and wife. How close is the kingdom of God? Well, it's not 3 feet away. It's near. It's like you can't get any closer than that. So this is where we're going, right? You want to be union with God. And of course, I put in this picture right here because this is Sponsa Christi, the bride of Christ. That's the mystical picture that is from not only from Exodus, that's the wedding that happened at Mount Sinai, where God took his people into a covenant relationship. You know, we miss that. We often think that God is a tyrant and has laws. Nope, he's in a covenant wedding relationship. And ultimately that's carried through to the New Testament. So even that imagery shows up today with the wedding at Cana. Okay, now we need to do a little bit of background. Now this is on number 5, so on the second page. And we need to talk a little bit about days of the week. So, for instance, we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, those are our names, what we call the days of the week. But that's neither biblical nor within Jewish culture. So, in the Bible and in Jewish culture, how do they label their days?
First day, second day, third day, etc.
Yes. Okay. So Monday is 1. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not. Monday is 2. Thank you. 3, 4, 5, 6. On the 7th day, God rested. So there you have your Sabbath day. And John says at the very end of John, after Jesus resurrected on the Sabbath day, he says it was the first day of the week. So this is the biblical way of naming your days of the week. So you don't give them, well, how do we do it? How do we Christians name our days of the week?
Based on Anglo-Saxon gods.
Yes, because that's what we want to do, right? There's some Roman gods and the Anglo-Saxon Nordic gods. And so this is how, when we refer to our days of the week, we go right to the pagan gods, which reminds us every day that today is Woden's Day or Odin's Day. So this is modern English. Sunday, of course. Who are we worshiping on Sunday? Now, who are the pagans worshiping on Sunday? The sun. Yeah, that's an easy one. So the Roman god was Apollo. The celestial body is the sun. So they're going to worship the sun, and it's the sun's day on Sunday. Monday is Diana, and she's the god of the moon. So we have Sunday and Moon Day. Then you have, this is one of I don't know why this is my favorite, Tuesday is the god Two, Tiw. And 2 is the planet Mars, celestial body. Wednesday, which would be today, this is Woden or Odin, and that's a Nordic god, Mercury. Then you have Thursday, which is Thor. So Thor's Day, and that's Jupiter. And then Friday, another one of my favorites, I'm not sure why, Frigg, and she is the goddess, she's a goddess, Venus. And then, of course, Saturday was Saturnus. Now, in the Nordic language, Saturdays are different, and it has to do with some kind of washing. I'm not really sure where that comes from, but we use the Roman Saturnus, and then we have Saturday, which is Saturn. Okay, so there's our days of the week. Now, why do they follow the numbers? Yes, Genesis 1. Yeah. Hey, we don't want to think for ourselves and try to come up with names of days. Let's just go to Genesis 1. And God can name the days, day 1, day 2, day 3. That's good enough for us. So they're just going right to Genesis. Another thing that if you consider, now you can't underestimate the importance of Genesis. And it's real tough to study it only in English. But one thing I love to point about Genesis is, as God is creating the world, if we think about this idea of transforming the soul, a moment of enlightenment where the light begins to shine, when God creates the world, he starts with, and it was evening, and it was morning. So what comes first? Well, you start at night though, right? So, and it was evening, so a Jewish day starts at sundown, and the first part of the day is dark, and then slowly but surely the light begins to dawn. And so you look at, if you just look symbolically at how God creates the world, it's a movement from darkness to light. Every day, out of darkness and into light. And this is what he's doing with human beings. He's still in the business of darkness to light. As we become enlightened, as his light informs our awareness. So it's a really cool picture of moving from darkness to light. Just a thought about Genesis 1. All right, now let me just tell you a quick story. Okay, this is a Bible shop. It's called Shorashim of the Old City. This is in the old part of Jerusalem. It's in the old city of Jerusalem, in the Jewish quarter. And Shorashim is a word that means roots. Shorashim, Shoresh is roots, or root, singular. Shorashim, roots. And it's a wonderful little shop. The two brothers that own it try to bring in different cultures and religions to have a discussion about where our differences are, how we see things. It's a wonderful shop. So it was a Tuesday, and we're walking from the pools of Bethesda, and then you have to walk past the Western Wall. And so Bonnie and I we're walking from the pools of Bethesda, we're going past the Western Wall, and we're headed to this shop right here. And what we noticed all along the way, all these rooms with wedding parties. Now, the wedding had happened earlier in the sunlight, which for the Jewish person is the third day of the week. 6 o'clock comes. It's now the fourth day, but to us, it's still Tuesday. So we see these weddings, wedding after wedding after wedding, but they had clearly been over. They're now in the reception time, and they're very Orthodox, meaning there was a divider in the room. The women were on one side, the men were on the other, and the girls are like peeking around the divider to talk to their, it's so far removed from our own culture today. But so here's the point. We see all these wedding. We walk up to this store. So I'm talking to the shopkeeper, and I said, "What's with all the weddings today?" And now he knows I'm a Christian. He knows I'm a student. And he says, and he gets this smile like he's about to challenge me. He says, "What day of the week was the wedding that Jesus went to in Cana?" And I just sat there like totally dumbfounded. I was like, "What? What do you mean, what day of the week? I have no idea what." So he says, "Look it up." So I open it up. And what does it say? Now, on the third day, there was a wedding. Now, why? Okay, now third day had just been that afternoon. So there's the custom within Judaism, or at least within certain communities within Judaism, that you get married on the third day. So is it any surprise that on the third day, there's a wedding in Cana? No. In fact, this is one of these things that there are a few things within Jewish culture. Naming your child on the eighth day. There's another one I can't remember. And I think this one that doesn't show up anywhere in Jewish writings until much later, but you see it in the New Testament as a tradition. So he says, "When was the wedding?" And I said, "Well, third day." And he goes, "Yeah, that's today, what we call Tuesday." And I was like, "Oh man, you got to be kidding me." Then his next question, why? Why do you get married on a Tuesday or on the third day? Did anybody Google this? Let's go to where do they come up with the naming of their days? What's the important chapter? Genesis chapter 1. So what does Genesis chapter 1 is there about a third day? Aha, Rosalind. Yes, Rosalind got it in the chat. Here we go. So if you go to Genesis 1 and the third day, which is verses 9 to 13, there's something unique about the third day because God gives double blessings. So verse 10 has the phrase, God saw that it was good, that it was tov. And then again in verse 13, God saw that it was good. So on Tuesdays, you get a 2-time blessing for the third day of the week. Now, first of all, let me just say this. How biblical are they acting? I mean, we think, Saturday, we'll just go have a wedding because that's just our culture. You don't do anything without going to the Bible. Now, if you read about this, and I encourage you to Google it, you will see that there's no actual firm tradition, but everybody knows the traditions out there. So there's no firm tradition. And then at one point even, and I think this has to do with a lot of the persecution that happened, that the rabbis suggested Thursdays later. They come back and they say maybe on a Thursday. But some of that change came from the fact that there were persecutions at Jewish weddings. Terrible, terrible persecutions. Okay, so now if I go back to this, if you go back to John 1, and it was the third day. See, that's not just a random thing. What's he telling us? This is the day for weddings. And it has something to do with, we go all the way back to that Genesis 1, which John is doing all the time. There's something happening, and it's a third day event. But that's one of the main points. You know, to me, here's a Jewish man he's not a rabbi, but the guy, the shopkeeper, who's talking to me like a rabbi would, because a rabbi wants you to think. He wants you to have the intuitive knowledge inside of you. It's harder to get rid of. It sticks longer when you have the experience of discovering something you didn't know. It's just how well he knew his New Testament too. Now he's works with Christians a lot, so he does know these things. But it was just right off the bat. Well, what day of the week was the wedding in Cana? Oh, third day. Never even thought about it. Okay, now what I'm going to do. All right, this one I looked up. I just Googled this. This is an organization. It's called Chabad, and you can find Chabad pretty much anywhere. Chabad is actually an acronym. This word doesn't mean anything in Judaism. Oh well, the acronym is Hokmah, which is the CH, Bina, the B, and Da'at, and that stands for wisdom, understanding or discernment, and knowledge. So Da'at is knowledge. And so they named their movement after, now you find this trifecta, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge is everywhere in the Bible. Everywhere. Paul uses it all the time. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And that's when Chabad says, how does God descend into the earth? The first point, well, there's a crown, and then it descends into wisdom and understanding and knowledge. But it's not knowledge of the intellect, it's knowledge of your being, intuitive knowledge, deep understanding, rather than just intellectual knowledge. Okay, so what are the approved dates for a wedding? Well, if we go down the page a little bit, here's what they say. Tuesdays. That's the day you want to do a wedding, because that's the third day and you get the double blessing. So that's one of the cool points about this wedding here in Cana. Now now we're going to do something, and we're really going to depart the logical reason. We're going to go back to intuitive thinking and I want to think about simply if you feel any of the symbolic association. So we're not worried about the words on the page. We're worried about the symbols that they point us to. Okay, so if you go to Genesis chapter 1, which you don't have to go to right now, I'll give you the answer. In Genesis chapter 1, read about it later. The third day begins, so in Genesis, the third day begins with water. God is going to divide the water. And then you're going to have plants come up out of the ground, out of the earth. And so the third day starts with water and it ends with fruit trees. And the vine is one of the significant fruit trees within the Israel faith. I'll show you, there's a couple of verses that point that out. What's Jesus doing?
He's starting with water.
Yep.
And ending fruit.
Yeah, with the fruit of the vine. Blessed are you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagefen. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who created the fruit of the vine. Said every Friday evening when you're about to sip the wine. This is the traditional blessing. I put it on your handout so you could probably see it better. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe. Now, a Sabbath celebration celebrates the creation of the world. Every Friday night you get to celebrate that God created the world. What a gift. And we celebrate that through wine. And you created the fruit of the vine. So is it possible that even the third day in this wedding event that is symbolic of something deeper, the movement from water to wine, just like in Genesis? I put on here from Joel 2:22, I put this on your sheet. Notice the two fruits that they mentioned, right? So do not be afraid, you wild animals. The pastures in the wilderness are becoming green. The trees are bearing their fruit. And the two that they mention are the fig tree and the vine. What was in the story about Nathaniel? Fig tree. And the very next story about the vine. So is it possible that Jesus is opening up our awareness of this, the end, the coming of the Lord, the age of the Messiah? And you don't want to say dogmatically yes or no. You just look at the symbols and let the symbols speak for themselves. So, for instance, the Messianic age, the age of the Messiah, is defined by the fig tree and the vine. Everyone will sit in peace under a fig tree and a vine. Now, is that what John's getting at? I don't know. But is it the dawning of this Messianic age that's showing up in a wedding where the bridegroom is coming to get his bride? Okay. And then water to wine. This is an important one. We'll talk about it when we get to Dionysus. In the ancient world that's everywhere around Israel, that water to wine symbolizes some divinely powered transformation. Because they noticed something. Hey, look, the rain falls in the early spring. And the water would represent the mundane. But that rain then leads us to a vine. We don't know how that happens. That leads us to a grape. We're not really sure how that happens. But also, it leads us to wine. And so the mundane of the water has become something extraordinary. And we didn't have anything to do with it. It was all a divine process, guided by some unseen force. So that water to wine represents that symbolic, divinely powered transformation. Well, what's happening to the soul of a human being when they come to Jesus? You have the same, it's something that goes from mundane to extraordinary, this mysterious process. You know, Jesus tells that parable about the plant. The farmer plants the plant, but every day it grows. He doesn't understand how it grows. And we'll talk about this when we get to Dionysus, but in that ancient world, this water to wine was evidence of the epiphany of the god. So for the worshipers of Dionysus, when they said, oh, look, the water turned into wine, that was evidence of the presence of that god showing up. Now, I'm not equating Jesus at all to Dionysus. He's the vine. But you could see why would John tell this story knowing that Dionysus is right down the road? Well, the presence of God is showing up, right? He's showing up in this very first sign, water to wine. There's that powerful transformation. So You can see we've completely departed any rational thinking here. We're just looking at symbols. And then, because John tells us, who's the true vine? Yeah, Jesus. So we recognize that the soul is something very important that can be transformed. And so when we come to the vine and we're in Him, we receive the benefit of that and we then transform. And the cool thing about this whole thing of Jesus as the vine is we're the branches, right? And who bears the fruit on the vine? The branches. We do. You're supposed to be the fruit bearing, right? That's us over here. So Jesus says, look, it's through my power that you'll transform, but the world knows that I'm alive because of your fruit. So go produce fruit. And then we have to go out and be the branch. So anyway, okay. And then I just put down here that souls are transformed from the ordinary to the extraordinary. And that is a symbol of water to wine that we just kind of leave. Well, we don't really go down that path. Now, that ends, this is my last slide right here. That last little piece here, part of the process of letting the symbols really Haggah marinate in our soul is to let go. It's a constant letting go of maybe how we've read the story before, or if there's a literal interpretation, to let that go, to only allow the symbols to speak, and they speak intuitively. And we say, I think I see something.